Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. Today is going to be another my thoughts on, I apologise, it's a day or so late. I had a lot going on at the weekend and all of last week, so I didn't really get a chance to sit down and record this. As you can tell, I'm back in my old digs from last year. I think this will be the last or maybe second to last video I record here before I move out. So, yeah, been a bit busy, so I apologise this video is a little bit late. However, we have things to talk about. Now, obviously, there's been one major reveal that went out a couple of days ago, which is the Warcry official reveal. However, I'm going to talk about that next week, once we have a bit more information about how the game plays. So today, I want to talk about the Sylvaneth, the upcoming Battletome for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, that will be out next week. Oh, sorry, I should say, will be out this weekend. It'll be out on Saturday, which should be lots of fun to explore and see how the Sylvaneth have evolved, because the Sylvaneth are an old Battletome, a really old Battletome. They've been around since the very early days of AOS 1. In fact, I think they were among the first 4 or 5 Battletomes ever released. Certainly, they were given Battletomes before Allegiance abilities were really a thing, before really anything was really a thing. It was very much in the early days of Age of Sigmar, and whilst they've gotten by, they've kind of been crying out for an update. And we've been waiting for this book for a while, since we knew it was coming all the way back since April, May, whenever Luden Curse was, because we knew we got the Arc Revenant in there, so we knew we were going to get an update in some form to the Sylvaneth, and now it's finally here. It's got through whatever was holding it up, and here it is. So let's jump into the article for the pre-order, just so we know exactly what we're getting. Then we'll look at some of the things they're changing in the new Battletome. If you want to see the points changes, go read your General's Handbook, and then we'll have a look at the new Endless Spells, as well as the Awakened Wildwood terrain piece. So, as I say, let's start with the pre-orders. Obviously, everyone's seen this cover art by now of this Arc Revenant. It is absolutely gorgeous. Generally, the art team has really stepped up. Well, they've always been really good, but that is a really, really, really good one in terms of Battletome cover art. You can also get your Endless Spells and your Awakened Wildwood terrain piece, which we will discuss in a minute. Your Warscroll cards, as well as some of the worst dice I think we've ever seen. Now, I'm not going to open it up here because that takes you to the GW shop page, but there's no numbers on these dice. Like, genuinely, there are no numbers. Like, you have to try and count them off based on, like, the number of leaves on the dice, and the 1 and the 6 are almost completely non-distinct as which is a 1, which is a 6. So, not great. Granted, they'll probably roll better than some of the dice we've had before, like the Squig dice, but when designing dice, your 1s through 6 need to be clearly visible at a glance when you throw the dice. That's kind of important. So, yeah, tip for the design team, make clearer dice, please. But that's our pre-orders. There is more stuff coming on pre-order. So there's a couple of Battletomes. Start collecting sets for 40k. We've got a Blood Bowl team for the Wood Elves, as well as I think a couple of other bits as well. But that's not the purpose of today's video. So we're going to move on and we're going to look at the Battletome preview. So yeah, there's not a lot being released this time because the model range is complete. Aside from re-releasing the Arc Revenant from Luden Curse, because that's sold out like that. But let's see what we're getting in the new book. First off, their Allegiance ability, or broadly their Allegiance ability, which is known as Navigate Realm Routes. So, Sylvaneth's gimmick, always, back in the day, was their ability to teleport around between the various Sylvaneth Wildwoods, as they used to be known, that basically formed the entire linchpin of their army. You got bonuses from Wildwoods. I think they did damage to stuff. You could summon them, if I recall, and you could teleport units between them as a way of getting around the fact your army was, well, not slow, but could do with being faster because it had no cavalry, it had no flying units, and some of its magic was obviously quite short-ranged. So it really made up for their lack of like fast units to have the ability to teleport it over the place. And again, they've been given that ability. So one friendly unit wholly within 6 inches of a Wildwood can navigate the realm routes. If you do so, remove from the battlefield and set up again within 6 inches of another Wildwood, and more than 9 from any enemy units. So it's not strictly clear as to what am I saying? Whether every Wildwood can teleport 1 unit, or whether it's 1 unit for your whole army in that phase, because it just says 1 friendly unit rather than friendly units. So I'll be interested to see how that's sort of clarified in the designer's commentary or the errata or whatever else. But that means that it's quite simple now. It's very streamlined, which is something that AOS 2 has done quite well, and hopefully will give Sylvaneth players enough maneuverability and flexibility without being completely silly or treading on the toes of other armies that rely on a lot of teleportation or fast maneuverability, such as maybe the Stormcast Eternals, who can obviously drop a lot of units in but can only do it once, or the Ideneth Deepkin, who are stupid fast, but don't have the ability to teleport. So I think it's a good balance, and I like the idea. The Lore of the Deepwood is their magical abilities. So they've basically had the Lore of Life from Warhammer Fantasy for a long time. Throne of Vines, Regrowth, these sorts of names should mean something to you. But they've also added a few new things as well. So the first thing they've done is added a resurrection spell to Sylvaneth, Verdurous Harmony. So 18-inch range. Add 1 slain model to a unit, or if it's dryads or revenants, you get D3 models. That's a powerful res ability, and if you combine it with things like the Emerald Life Swarm Endless spell, and just general defense, which is something Sylvaneth can do very well, is be quite tanky, it's actually quite difficult to kill Sylvaneth armies if they're doing mass resurrection. So a very elite army like Kurnoth Hunters will absolutely love this, because Kurnoth Hunters, I can attest, are very, very difficult to kill. It won't save your monsters because they come in units of 1, but things like Kurnoth Hunters in particular will really benefit from it, and being able to just top up your slightly punchy but also kind of flimsy units like Revenants will also be nice, and making sure your Dryads can just keep chunking is never a bad thing as well, and keeping their high unit size benefits going. Regrowth is, rather than be a res spell like it used to be back in Fantasy, is just a big healing spell. So this is kind of like Verdurous Harmony for your monsters, because it heals D6 wounds allocated to a unit. So obviously this is going to work well on Kurnoth Hunters who have 5 wounds, I believe. So they'll get a decent amount of healing out of this. But obviously Tree Lords, Striker Hammerdreth, Alarielle, your other heroes, they're going to really benefit from just having D6 wounds restored to them very, very often. And again, in combination with the Emerald Life Swarm, if you have it, this will really make Sylvaneth armies quite difficult to kill if they've got a lot of wizards flying around who could just have one dude concentrating on rezzing. I can tell you as someone who plays Ideneth, just having concentrated rezzing is quite nice, and another doing concentrated healing, and you can also throw the endless spell out anywhere. Seriously, that could be very, very difficult. They've also got Throne of Vines, which is a spell I used to love back in the day because it buffed all of your Lore of Life spells. Nowadays what it does is it makes your spells much easier to cast until your caster moves. So you set it up, you cast it on yourself, you put up your little chair, and you get +2 to cast. So on really powerful, like high number of spell wizards who could throw 2 or 3 spells out, which you'll probably be able to do through artifacts. You can say you can cast an additional spell, or maybe through having powerful named characters like Alarielle if you decide to not use her as a melee beatstick. Genuinely, +2 to cast on your other spells. Like Arcane Bolt now goes off on a 3, Mystic Shield goes off on a 4, and they're much harder to unbind because every 10+ is actually now completely unbindable. So that's very nice as well. And for your big power spells, such as your Verdurous Harmony now goes off on a 5+. Some of the big endless spells now go off on a 6 or a 7, or maybe even less plus. So genuinely a very powerful spell if you've got the right support for it. And of course, if you're playing a very fast-moving army, this isn't going to help you because you can't teleport them around, and you need to set them up in the right place to make sure you've got the range to do all that stuff. So maybe in combination with the Balewind Vortex, or the Umbral Spell Portal, you might get even more mileage out of this. So, yeah, some combinations there, I think. There's also a spell called Verdant Blessings, which allows you to set up an extra Awakened Wildwood. You get one at the start of the game, because all factions get one terrain piece at the start of the game nowadays. But now you can set up more. Rather than the Nurgle tree system, which is set one up, it generates points, and then you summon using your summoning points, you just cast a spell and you get one. Now, bear in mind, spells are one per army, as opposed to one per wizard. So you'll only get one caster using Verdant Blessing on a given turn. So it's not going to be too insane, and because it's casting value 6, it can be unbound. And of course, it's only got a 24-inch range. It's not set up anywhere. There are definitely very powerful things you can do with Verdant Blessing, particularly in combination with the Navigate Realm Roots ability and their other abilities, which we'll get to later in the video. So, a very powerful spell if handled correctly. I think that Sylvaneth are going to be a very precision army. They're not going to be a beat stick, sort of just run around smashy. Well, they could do that, but I don't think they will. They've also been given glades, so much like the Stormcast had their Storm Host, the Daughters of Cain had their temples. You have the hosts for Nurgle or Khorne. Basically, same thing. You get a set of faction abilities that lock you into certain things, but then give you some bonuses on top. We won't go through this super in-depth. You've seen this sort of thing before if you've played Sigmar in AOS 2 or have faced an army that is in AOS 2. So, Dreadwood buffs Spite Revenants. Heartwood buffs Kurnoth, has an artifact that buffs Kurnoth Hunters, which is really, really dangerous, because Kurnoth Hunters are really quite powerful. You've got a monster one called Oakenbrow, which is going to make it harder to make Tree Lords and their abilities get weaker. They're still going to be just as easy to kill and just as punchy most of the time, but when you start damaging them, it takes longer for them to become weakened by that damage. Hopefully they've learned their lesson from Gristlegore and the Flesh Eater Court, which was so powerful that every single one of its constituent components just got slapped in the post-General's Handbook points update. The Art Regent on Terrorgeist got whacked. The Terrorgeist Ghoul King got whacked. Basically all the things that made Gristlegore stupid dangerous got slapped, and it will be interesting to see what that looks like. So hopefully they've learned their lesson from Gristlegore, which once it came out proved to be utterly broken. Flesh Eater Courts were and possibly still are one of the most powerful builds in the game, so hopefully we don't see a repeat of that with Oakenbrow. You've also got some command traits, so buffs while near Wildwoods, buffs when dealing with endless spells, or maybe something more melee focused, which is get buffs on the charge, add 2 attacks on the charge, so you can really be a powerful smasher, which is a nice combination. So there's a lot going on here, and I think Sylvaneth have got a lot of interesting things going for them. Whether they'll be up here, I don't know, we'll see. But they've also had some updates to their Warscrolls, as well as the points that were changed in the handbook. They've also tweaked a few things. So Tree Revenants now are more able to teleport. They don't need Wildwoods in order to do it. They can just teleport as they wish without using up Navigate Realm Roots or having to stand near a Wildwood anyway, which is, of course, very, very powerful because it frees up your teleportation slots for other units that might benefit from this and allows you to make that crazy fast Sylvaneth army you might be used to from the past. Dryka Hammerdreth has been made into even more of a glass cannon, so now she gets both of her qualities and her sort of changeable mood thing instead is a buff to one of those abilities as opposed to a buff to her in general. So I'll be interested to see how she plays. I've seen her once on the battlefield and she just got sniped out, but she has the potential to be utterly terrifying if you could use her correctly. So I think making her even more of a glass cannon is a nice buff, and I approve of that change. And Kurnoth Hunters with Great Swords, so they separated Kurnoth Hunters out from having one Warscroll, 3 weapon options into 3 separate Warscrolls, and they've done that, and they've also given the ability for the Great Swords to get a nice little boost. They've also given us a new battle plan, which they've shown off as a Sylvaneth Nurgle Forbidden Power style battle plan. Not going to talk about that because that's not relevant to the book, but if you want to do it and play it for yourself, go right ahead. And then we have the actual new stuff, the Endless Spells and the Awakened Wildwood itself, which we've talked about a couple of times throughout the video already. So, what I'll say about Sylvaneth before I just jump into this, because there's a lot to unpack here as well, is I don't think they're an army I'd like to play, because as much as I play Elven armies, which are very fast, very squishy, and very powerful in melee, Sylvaneth, their sort of very defensive approach is something I've done before with my Stormcast, and while I don't mind it as an option, it's not my sort of preferred playstyle to play very defensively and rely on magic and buffs to do stuff. I much prefer to be in combat, doing damage, and playing that sort of a game. Are they a good army? I think they'll be fine. Are they a tricksy army? Yes, they'll take some getting used to. Will they be top tier? I think that depends on how skilled the generals are and just how nonsensical the combinations get. But let's have a look at the new Endless Spells, which are interesting. So the first one is the Glade Worm, or as someone put it on Twitter as I saw, the Red Terror Conversion Kit. So this thing is one of the most interesting Endless Spells I think we've ever seen, because it's an Endless Spell that does a bit of everything. So you summon it, it's predatory, it can fly, which is interesting because it's a worm, but it can move around and do stuff, but it's an Emerald Life Swarm and a Ravenak, but also it's kind of worse than both. So if it passes over enemy units, it could punch them on a 3+, and it has, after its move, a little nuke effect of healing for all Sylvaneth units wholly within 6 inches of it. So small elite units, again, like Kurnoth Hunters, Tree Lords, and the like, they can get close by to where this thing's just floating around. If you can keep control of it, just will regularly just get pulses of healing. And if your opponent takes control of it, well, they can't just shove it back into your lines, because it'll just heal up the stuff on your lines. And if you shove it into the enemy's lines, it's going to do damage, so it's not useless like if a Life Swarm gets shoved into the enemy's lines, at which point it just starts healing them. So a very interesting Endless Spell that might not be the most powerful, but I think has a lot of useful applications, and I like that. The Spike Swarm Hive is actually one that synergizes a little bit with certain stuff, but again, it's a really interesting Endless Spell. So it is actually not predatory. It doesn't say that it is, but what it does is provides auras. So at the end of the hero phase, the player who set it up gives out a boost. It's got an 8-inch range in both cases for each unit totally within 8 inches. On a 2+, either give that unit Mystic Shield or give it +3 to move and charges. Wow. Like, wow. So an 8-inch bubble of Mystic Shield might not sound like that much to you. But believe me, rerolling ones to save in an army that's already relatively tanky without having to use up your wizard spell slots is very nice. And it means that you don't have to be chucking out a Mystic Shield because you need it. Now you just throw this hive down and it will constantly be giving out Mystic Shields to all of your casters that are stood near it, perhaps some of your smaller elite units that are stood near it, or whatever else. It's quite useful. Or if you're playing a more aggressive game, you can chuck it out a little bit forward. You've got a 15-inch setup range. You just throw it out in front of your lines so that when your units move up to it, then on that 2+, they get +3 to move and +3 to charge. That adds 6 to your unit's hit range. Minimum. Now, if you're a death player and is used to saying, oh, I charge a minimum of 6 inches, you know how powerful this is. That you have a minimum amount of movement before you connect with your enemy. And adding 6 to your base movement is kind of insane. So that makes Tree Lord something like move 11 with a 2d6 +3 charge. So that's an average charge of 10. Or if your Dryads just need to rush forward and screen, fine. Have move like 9 or 8 or whatever move Dryads are these days. And then just set up a nice defensive wall. Is your wizard about to get sniped off? Okay, I'm just going to run them in the other direction with +3-inch move. It's really quite nice and very synergetic with your army and flexible. Sylvaneth seem to be very, very flexible. which is a good thing. They can be very aggressive or very defensive, and I like that, though I don't know if they're for me, as I said already. Then there's the Vengeful Skull Root, which is the third endless spell. So this makes more stuff run away that's not Sylvaneth, and there's a Battle Shock test nearby, which is kind of neither here nor there. It's a nice little booster, but I don't think it's that insane. I don't think anyone's running the Horrorghast, for example. It is predatory, but it can also punch things it passes over, but if it's near a Wildwood, then it punches them a little bit harder, and again, Sylvaneth are not affected. So it's kind of a slightly worse version of the Ravenak, but also it has that Horrorghast ability tied onto it as well. Again, flexibility and options for what you want to do with your endless spells. Is it going to be insane? Well, most damage-dealing predatory endless spells are proved to kind of suck. So we'll see how it goes, I guess. And then we have the Awakened Wildwood. Right. This thing terrifies me, and it should probably terrify some of you. So, the Awakened Wildwood kit now is a series of 3 little trees that go together in a nice triangle so that you don't have to put down a flat Citadel Wood and then balance models in between it. You can still use a Citadel Wood as an Awakened Wildwood, but this is more convenient because it takes up a little bit more footprint and also has empty space rather than being taken up by, you know, slightly rugged terrain on the scenery base, which makes them awkward to pose. So, what this does is obviously give you your teleportation. It punches not Sylvaneth stuff that's near it on a 6, same as the Nurgle tree. It is also able to punch things that cast spells near it. Oh, sorry. If a wizard casts a spell near a Wildwood, then each unit that is not Sylvaneth can get punched after the spell goes off. So it's a nice little source of damage for you. And if you can get these spread across the board in a quite a high density thanks to summoning them with more spells, you can actually start really throwing down the hurt of, oh, you want to move across the board? Get punched. You want to do some powerful magic? Get punched. And that's kind of nice. But the main thing they've got is models are not visible to each other if an imaginary straight line drawn between the closest points of the 2 models crosses over more than 1 inch of an Awakened Wildwood. This does not apply if either model can fly. Line of sight blockers. This terrain is a giant footprint of line of sight blockers. You can't see through it at all. If you play Free Guild and Sylvaneth get one down here and one down here, they can just come through here. You can't see them until they come out of the woods. You can only shoot through that gap. You're kind of in trouble. If you play a very melee-focused army, you kind of probably don't care. But then you've got to run through these woods to get to your enemy, and so you can cast spells on them, or maybe unleash prayers on them, or activate abilities that require you to see the enemy. Whatever else, you can't see. So you've got to run this gauntlet, where I've already said, you get punched. And if you play a ranged army, oh, have fun. Just have fun being able to not see what you're shooting at. If you play an army like Ideneth, or Caradron, or other armies with a heavy amount of fly, this will not concern you, but at the same time, I'm intrigued how this actually synergizes with the Sylvaneth themselves, because the Sylvaneth can't fly. The only model that can fly in a Sylvaneth army is the Art Revenant, and maybe Alarielle, but I don't think she can. So, they can't see through their own terrain, as far as we know. I'll double check the text now, just to make sure that I'm not missing something. No, doesn't say that Sylvaneth are not affected. So, these things have got to really hurt and also aid Sylvaneth armies. If you're playing an aggro melee build, you'll throw these down so you can't be shot on the way in. If you're playing a ranged army, you might actually want to put this sort of in a corner where you can teleport to it if you need it, but it's not going to get in the way of you unleashing volley after volley of arrows and spells, because it's a line of sight blocker, and that comes with its own set of problems. So it's a very interesting terrain piece where all of its sort of secondary effects are one-sided, but its primary effect, that being line of sight blocker, is actually the same for everybody. And while the Sylvaneth player will build their list around whether they want lots of Wildwoods in the way or not, it is interesting that it doesn't seem to not affect Sylvaneth? If it doesn't affect Sylvaneth, then it's absolutely terrifying, because Sylvaneth shooting armies are just going to have so much fun, and Sylvaneth melee armies are also going to have so much fun because they can't be shot, whereas they can shoot back or run up without any risk. It's scary, but I think it's an interesting balance point, and I look forward to seeing how it actually plays out. And there you go. That is everything we know about the upcoming Sylvaneth Battletome. Obviously, some people have got early copies and will have done their reviews and started talking about it and putting things online. And I encourage you to look at that if you're a Sylvaneth player yourself and you want to know what you're getting into when the book comes out on Saturday. Personally, for me, Sylvaneth are not an army I'm going to play. They're a cool looking army, and they have got a lot of interesting synergies and flexibility going on with them, which I like. But I don't know, something about them just doesn't connect with me. Maybe it's because they're kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none sort of army. Maybe it's because I just don't want to paint all that brown. Maybe some other reason, whatever it is. Sylvaneth are not an army I'm going to play, but I'm intrigued to see how they perform, and I kind of look forward to facing them at some point in the future. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think of the Sylvaneth in the comments below. Are you excited for this new book? Do you think they'll be powerful? Do you think they need a bit more combined with the points changes in the handbook? Just let me know your thoughts. I'm very intrigued to see what you have to say. Next week, assuming something doesn't happen that changes my plans, we're going to talk about Warcry, which we've seen the official pre-order reveal of now. We'll talk about the warbands. We'll talk about the gameplay. There'll be probably trailers and all that stuff. I've been hearing that it's a bit of a kill team, but Age of Sigmar. It's got all the different factions in it. I really want to talk about that, and we will do that next week, which probably will go on even longer than this video. Oh my god, how long have I been talking? Right. Thank you very much for watching Tactica Imperialis. Sorry, headphone users. And I'll see you all again. Bye for now.